We're going to speak today about one of the, I'm sorry to say, mistakes that many people have made about the nature of God. And that's a big statement. But I'm issuing that statement from words from the holy Baal HaTanya, and that it's an important thing that we get clarity on this, because the impact of having the healthy perspective will completely bring God into your life and improve your quality of life in a way that you can't even compare, from basically some level of a distant God, a God who's far, a God who's not interested, to a relationship with God who is intimately part of your life. That's what we're talking about, is that shift in a way of seeing the nature of existence, from God being very far to God being very, very close. So close that we're absolutely one with God. And we said that the root of that mistake, the Baal HaTanya taught us, was looking at existence in a way that God created the world and then left. Now, where does the root of that problem arise from? From the following. The root of that problem, says the Baal HaTanya, comes from a worldview that God is creating the world. I'm going to use the Kabbalistic language and then we'll bring it down. Yesh mi yesh. That God created the world something out of something. And we're going to use an analogy to explain that. That just like if I have a silversmith and somebody wants to make, what do you make with silver? I think of Kiddush cups. What do you guys think of? A spoon. Let's go with the spoon. Can you bend the spoon, Zach? No, you're Kohen. Kohanim could do big stuff. So, how does a silversmith make a spoon? He takes a bunch of bullion, silver, $31 an ounce nowadays, Chevera. Gold is up above $2,600. The greatest price of gold in the history of the world. And he takes that glob of silver and he then heats it, he fashions it, he molds it, and you had just chomer, a hunk of silver, and you turned it into a usable vessel, a spoon or a Kiddush cup, or maybe a candelabra. Sounds nice, right? So, I'm telling you now the mistake. So God took material, ancient matter, important, ancient matter, something that was there. And you know what he did with that matter? He started to manipulate it and form it. And then he took that matter and he made something out of it. Well, just like a silversmith can take a hunk of silver and he can make a spoon. And you know what he does when he's hungry later that day? He puts the spoon on the table. It's been a good day. He goes out, gets a pastrami sandwich or a lafa, whatever he's into. And the spoon continues to exist without the constant input of the maker, right? The spoon is on the table. When the guy's having his pastrami sandwich, the spoon doesn't cease to exist. He doesn't need to be constantly making the spoon for it to exist. It's there. The spoon is extant. And the mistake is that if God creates the world something from something, then God could take this matter, he could manipulate it, and then he could leave. Because the world could exist because it was just in a different form. I just manipulate the form of the stuff and now leave. So the core of that error is that God did not create the world something from something. He created the world something from nothing. Yesh me'ayin. Nothing. Which means there was no matter there. Matter, anything finite, had to come from the infinite. And the infinite does not create and leave, because the creation, the finite, the yesh, is coming at all times, being infused with life from the infinite. The example we gave is like throwing a rock up in the air. The rock will only have force going up in kinetic strength in so long as there's kinetic energy there. But if that would run out, then the rock just plummets back down to the earth. So too the creation, the Baal HaTanya is explaining to us that creation is being constantly invigorated with energy. It's a constant flow, never stopping, of energy that is enlivening the creation. So the creation is one with Hashem. Hashem never departed the creation, because if you could theorize that, then there would be no creation. If God removed His influence, He removed His energy from the creation, then the creation would cease. The fact that it has not means that God is constantly energizing all of us this very second, which should be a great sense of happiness that we're here, and a great sense of closeness. Because if a person lives in a worldview of the watchmaker or the spoon maker, then whatever this God that they've created could be very far away, very distant, very not interested in me because he went out for a pastrami sandwich, or whatever, make up whatever you want, whatever God's reasons for leaving might be. But if God is not making spoons, but rather He's not fashioning a spoon out of something there, but that creation is coming out of God, it's flowing from the essence of God, from the will of God at all times, then you can't separate the creator from the creation, which means really all of us are within God and are flowing from God every single second. And those that completely tap into the reality of this basically become like shining lights of God in this world. The greatest of which was Moshe Rabbeinu, which we're going to get to later, and we talk about the special prophecy of Moshe being different than all the other prophets. That Moshe essentially, when he spoke, you experienced the Shechina Midaberes B'toich Groinai. It was like, so to speak, he was so tapped in to the flow of the energy that you experienced Hashem speaking through his throat. And when Avram, was alive, he was the chariot of kindness, that by seeing a human being, you saw God's energy of giving embodied in the world. And Yitzchak is Gevura, and so forth. We'll talk a lot about this on Sukkot. So far, so good? So this, the Baal HaTanya says we have to very much appreciate this distinction. And I'm going to use another language that's very, very important that we talk about. We're going to talk about a lot on Rosh Hashanah, is the language of the koyach of the poyel benifal, the power and the energy of the causer in the cause. Koyach ha-poyel benifal. Who's the poyel? That's how we mean poyelois. Who's the poyel? Who's the cause? God. What's the effect or the causation? Is us. But just like when you do something, there's the doing of the action, and what are you doing? I don't know, you're shooting a 3-point shot. The energy of the doer is in the action. It's only happening because, it's not bad form, right, Ben? It's in, the koyach of the poyel, you, is in the nifal. It's like you put. The difference is that you could see the ball separate from you. But with God, it's not that way. Is that God is always in the nifal. The ball never leaves the hand, so to speak. Or so to speak, the hand extends. It's all one thing. You can never separate the koyach of the poyel from the nifal. Yeah, Yoni?
We spoke the other day about like how Hashem created the world. It was through speech, and it was to reveal himself. And like the comparable of speech, like there could be two aspects of it. I want to hear your opinion on it. like speech is one thing, sharing from your inside to another person and sharing it over. And the second aspect is like for us speaking, like once we speak once, like it's gone. It's like the only reason that the voice is still there is because it's you constantly putting input. So the fact that Hashem created the world through speech, is that like a proof that it's constantly in itself like a comparison for us?
So for us, when we speak, like we mentioned, it's the inside of me, which is only known to me, being shared and expressed to another. And that's the analogy that when Hashem is speaking everything to existence, He's bringing from that which is in Hashem and expanding it, so to speak, sharing it, letting it flow outwards. That's the creation. But the difference between my speech is that you could put my speech on a recording machine and then put in the Walkman and play it back later. Remember the first time that, I'm from a day they used to have this thing called a Sony Walkman, and you could press the record button, and then someone would play back. And where oh my goodness! Where is that thing? You could take the speech and you could separate it from the person. But with Hashem, there's no separation. It's constant, energetic speech of revelation, because we're here. So it's not like God is saying, let there be heavens, let there be heavens, let there be heavens. It's a constant energizing through the Hebrew letters, which is the technology of all the different elements of creation and all the permutations of the letters that's creating existence. Okay, so far so good? This is the stuff that we've been talking about for thousands of years, is this. Now, why is this so relevant? Because in the second ikr of what it means to be a Jew is that we understand that God's unity is absolute. There's no parts. God and the creation are absolutely unified. You can't separate the creation. The creation is existing through the will, through Ritzono Yisborach of God, constantly enlivening the creation. We're going to see another analogy, which we're going to work on a little bit. And this is the analogy of the sun and its rays. So if I had rays, this is a famous analogy we talk about, rays coming in. So I could see one ray coming in through this window, right? You see you could tell how dirty your house and the air is, because you see all the little pieces of dust. And then I see another ray, I go to another house and there's more rays of light. I could think those are like separate things, because you do see it, it's a separate ray of light. And you could even think that the ray has like an independence. You could even forget that it might come from somewhere. I just see a ray right now. But if you're a wise man, what do? You trace the ray back to where it comes from. So in Hebrew we call, the ray is called an or, it's the light. But where does the or come from? It comes from the me'or. The me'or is the sun, the cause of the light. So you have the or, that's the light. But you have the me'or, mem makes it causative, that which causes light. So the or is the ray, the me'or is the sun. The sun is the causer of the light. So if I take that ray of light and I start to trace the ray of light back, and I get closer and closer to the sun, I start to lose the identity of the ray as a separate thing. I start to lose the identity that the ray is somehow his own thing.
How can we make it back if it's a ray is also infinite? Ray, there is rays like something vector is something that come from sun, and we cannot make it back.
The ray came from somewhere, right? It came from the sun.
Yeah, there is a source, infinite source. And
well, the sun's not infinite. The sun has boundaries and limitations. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful, but it's not infinite. But it's an analogy in our world. And God made this world, and He left His fingerprints in places where we could find Him. So the analogy of the sun and the rays is that now you have these rays. The rays look like there's something independent. But if you trace the ray back to where it comes from, the closer you get to the sun, to the source, the ray stops looking like something independent. The ray starts realizing, if you can go into the consciousness of the ray starts realizing that I have nothing without my me'or, without my source. That really all my energy depends on there being a me'or, a cause to my light. But only because the ray got far away, okay, I'm using this far away, because in physical terms it got further away, that it has an independent thing. But if you were to look at this ray the way it looks like on the sun, you wouldn't quite see an individualized ray. It would be on the face of the sun, you would encounter the me'or. You'd encounter the source of where the ray came from. What kind of independent identity does that light ray have when it's on its source?
Doesn't.
So it has an identity. It has an identity. But when it's consumed in the source of where it comes from, it doesn't seem to have an identity. But it does, because if it shines down here, it's definitely shining up there. It has an identity, but in the context of me coming from the me'or, you don't see that individualness when you're subsumed in your source. So this world is like rays of light. So we all feel like, yeah, look at me, independent. You see these gains? There's hard work that went into this. We feel very independent. But that's almost as humorous as a ray of light saying that I have an independent existence from the sun. Well, bro, let's trace those gains back to where they come from. Let's trace all that energy that you have back to the one that's creating you. So you start seeing yourself within the context of the source of life. What starts to happen is even when you're far away from the sun, this is a journey in consciousness, you start tracing yourself back to what you look like on the surface of the sun. And when you experience what you look like on the surface of the sun, that's a lot of unity consciousness. Now it's important, you exist up there. Baal HaTanya says if the ray of light is shining down here, certainly it's shining up there. Just in the context of being on the sun, being so much touching and in the source where you come from, your identity is much more in the entire consciousness of the oneness from where you come from. Do you know what you're supposed to do every single day? Think about this. Essentially trace your source back up to the surface of the sun. Every time you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It's Echad! One, you're suntanning on the sun. That's what that moment of Echad is supposed to be, of one. Is that there's a me on the surface of the sun. Now you exist up there, but in the context of the source of where you come from, the koyach of the poyel, the power of the cause, you're subsumed in that experience. Now Hashem made a world of free will. And basically your free will is, in a world where it looks like you're a ray that moved away from the sun, our job is to actually choose to make the journey back to source. And part of what Mashiach is going to do is going to show us how we all really are one within the source of where we come from. Okay, so in summary today, we spoke about one of the errors of thinking that God is far, is by saying that God created a world something from something. It's not something from something, it's something from nothing, which means constant input. How? Through the letters. And we explained also that the power of the cause is in the effect. And we used an analogy to go deeper into that today, the sun and its rays. This is an analogy from the Arizal, this is an analogy from Kabbalah, that a person should spend their entire life meditating on. And every single time that we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, you go into that unity consciousness by not feeling like a separate ray, distant from where you come from, but actually tracing your way back and feeling absolutely, essentially connected to Source. We should be Zaycha Mamish to walk around with this. And by the way, this is also a constant mitzvah. It's a constant mitzvah to feel yourself connected to Source, that you're never disconnected from Source, and to walk around with that feeling and help other people. And the reason why people oftentimes feel down and anxiety is they just feel so disconnected. When you could trace a person back to the source of where he comes from, all blessing comes to a person. We should see that blessing for everybody, Mitzvah Shem, and see much bounty and success for all of us. With Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'meherav yameinu. Amen. Amen. Have a wonderful day, my friends. Kol Tuv.